Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are discussing the underlooked shift happening to the utility grid sector, as even like Elon Musk has been known and has said that the system can't currently support an entire shift to electric vehicles. With so many investors flooding into EV stocks, lithium exploration, and battery companies, it's too underlooked today that the utility grid needs to go through the shift as well. And we have a company forefronting this industry called Tantalus System Holdings. We have the CEO here, Peter Londa, to discuss this broader sector conversation. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Great to see you again, Kyle, and thanks for including us.
Always a pleasure. You guys are very unique because not only are you generating revenue, but you are fronting an industry that I think is broadly underlooked. And before we kind of pick that apart and figure out what's going on there, I want to talk about the broader market, because obviously the topic right now, it's insane what's going on with Russia. Globally, it seems like we're seeing a mass shift of capital out of Russia, and I feel like it's going to start flooding over into the Western markets, but I would love to get your insights on how you feel and what this is going to cause to the general markets.
Yeah, as it relates to the turmoil that's unfolding right now between Russia and the Ukraine, as horrific as that is, what we see a common theme that's been unfolding now for a long time around this focus on energy independence. And I think given really current events, that message is more important now than ever for Europe, for the United States, and for other portions of the world, such that countries, regions of the world are not dependent on sources of fuel or sources of power from other countries and other locations that are problematic. And so when we think about energy independence, there is a component of that that gets to normal course, oil, gas, refining, and access to those types of resources. There's also then the wave of investment on renewables for countries or geographies that may not have access to those types of natural resources, or may have environmental constraints on accessing those natural resources. And so as you think about the importance of renewable energy and the emergence of batteries and other types of technology like solar panels, or just more conservation of electricity, right? It has a cascading impact on how power is delivered, where it's delivered, and how people consume it. And at the end of the day, regardless of the source, regardless of the technology, regardless of where it's generated, right? The nuts and bolts are how you and I, and anyone else listening today, accesses electricity or accesses, right, fuel for our burners, our heaters, our cars, to the extent that you haven't gone EV already. And so that ties very much into the utility industry, the integrity of the grid that we rely on, and that's what we're ultimately focused on as an organization. The macro themes don't necessarily have a direct correlation and impact to Tantalus as a company. Fortunately, we don't have exposure in Europe. We're really much focused US, Canada, Caribbean basin. But one of the key themes that's coming out of this is and what will unfold for investors in a macro trend is energy independence and the cascading impact that has. And we're in a position to help utilities prepare for that.
I think that's a great point, and we're going to dissect that a little farther. But right now, because Tantalus is kind of accelerating the digitization and management of the utility grid, and you're kind of exploring this whole new way outside of obviously the EV battery revolution. And I wouldn't mind just discussing that problem first and foremost, because a lot of people keep saying, like Elon Musk, that the utility grid needs to go through a massive upgrade. What is that problem exactly? How does that problem reflect down into affecting me or you if we're all plugging in battery vehicles?
Yeah, so at the highest level, we talk about it in the form of modernizing the existing electric grid, specifically the distribution grid, which is from a substation to point of consumption, where people live, where people work, where people do business. Within that modernization, our focus has and continues to be, as the first step of that modernization, is what we refer to as digitizing the grid, meaning taking a historical analog one-way legacy system and transforming that into a true digital network of intelligent connected devices that can send and receive data, and as a result of that data, be proactive and take action as things change. whether that ties to outages, whether that ties to change in consumption patterns, whether that ties to the adoption of new technology such as EVs. So in summary, modernization of the grid. Step one is digitizing the grid to make sure utilities have connected devices, kind of like an industrial internet of things. As you think about what Mr. Musk is talking about, and I think the broader adoption and accelerated adoption of electric vehicles, and certainly as gasoline in the United States potentially hits $5 or $5.50 with what's happening in today's world, but the economics of those electric vehicles really start to change for people. And so here's a specific example. If you look at the F-150 Lightning, which is getting tremendous attention, to that end, I've got my $100 reservation down. I just was disappointed by my local Ford dealership, which informed me that I didn't make the cut on their prioritized list. And so I'm being pushed into 2023, if not potentially 2024, right? So that shows the pent-up demand for the vehicle itself. But if and when I ultimately get that vehicle is going to need 19 kilowatt hours to be charged. Let me give you that in normal person speak. That's the equivalent of 6 central air conditioning units running at my home full time on the hottest day of the year for an entire day. It's a massive amount of electricity. So what that means is once I do get my F-150 Lightning, or when someone else gets the Silverado or any other vehicle that's coming into the market, depending on economic flexibility and dollar spend on vehicles, what it translates into for the utility is a spike in demand. That spike in demand translates into the integrity of the assets that deliver power to our homes. So more specifically, pole top transformers. Most of us live in communities that have power lines that are above the street and that are connected through a bunch of wooden or concrete utility poles. And on the top of those poles, more often than not, there's this big cylinder metal device. It's typically at the very top of that utility pole. You'd recognize it. It's a pole top transformer. Those pole top transformers are designed for a certain amount of electricity that we consume. So what's going to happen on my street when I get my F-150 and I charge it for the first time? The draw on that transformer, on that utility pole, is going to be significantly different than what it was designed to do. What that means for the utility is that transformer, it'll support the incremental load into my house, but it puts the asset, the integrity of that asset, at risk. It either means that pole top transformer is inadequate to charge my house as well as deliver power to someone else's house, especially if they get an electric vehicle. That translates into a device that ultimately gets to end of life faster or is incapable of supporting multiple homes because the demand consumption's changed and it ultimately fails. When pole top transformers fail, sometimes it just sounds like a big pop, a burst. You'd hear that, power goes out, inconvenience. In some circumstances, though, those pole top transformers catch fire. That's a real problem for a neighborhood, for a community. So that's the cascading impact that electric vehicles have for the utility. One, in summary, it's the incremental demand at a specific location at a different time of day. How that spike in demand or that change in demand impacts the assets that they rely on that we're monitoring for them, right? It means accelerated end of life of those devices or premature failure of those devices. And so how do we help the utility through a digitized network? A, pinpoint where an electric vehicle has shown up. Because those of you that have electric vehicles, my guess is you didn't tell your utility that you've purchased an electric vehicle. So how does the utility know? We can help them figure that out with data and connectivity. Then from just visualization and understanding where those electric vehicles are, the second piece, B, is what do they do about it? How do they motivate us to charge the devices at a different time of day that doesn't put stress on their system? Or over time, how do they upgrade the system, upgrade the devices so that they're capable of delivering reliable power to those electric vehicles? Those are the types of things that we're working on. Those are the things that Mr. Musk is talking about the grid's not designed to support. It really is. It's at our street. It's in our city blocks. It's where we live. And that's what we are focused on in terms of digitizing and ultimately modernizing for the utility industry.
That I don't think you could have said that any better, to be honest. I'm looking to get a Tesla myself at some point here. I'm more of a Tesla fan than a Ford fan, as I'm sure many of the viewers know. But talking about 2022 here, because man, that was such a great breakdown. I mean, you guys are already generating sales. Unlike a lot of small caps out there, I really feel like your stock is undervalued at this point. I think you guys are one of these technology companies that are just being broadly underlooked. But as we get through 2022, what are you looking at for sales growth here? Where are you guys are you partnering with governments? Like, how are you, or utilities, I'm going to say, but a lot of those large utilities are government operated. How do you guys see the growth coming in 2022?
Yeah, so let me talk about that, and then I'll come back to your comments on share price because I agree with you. But we've issued a press release tied to on the heels of announcing our first acquisition of as a public company of a software business that's going to help us accelerate enabling utilities to integrate and prepare for electric vehicles, rooftop solar, and other good things that are happening. But the guidance that we've provided is we expect revenue growth from 2021 to 2022 year over year to approximate 20 to 25%. What that translates into is a range of about 38.5 to a little over $40 million of revenue is the guidance that we've provided. Where that growth is coming from is a combination of a few things. One is backlog. Within that press release, we shared we have a record amount of backlog in our company's history as it relates to revenue that is scheduled to be delivered or expected to be delivered this calendar year 2022. We're entering into the year 2022 with $27 million of backlog already for this year. And so that in of itself gives us great visibility into the revenue trajectory of the company. Beyond backlog, we continue to demonstrate an ability to convince utilities to purchase our solution. Last year, we've recently announced we secured 25 new utilities, bringing us to almost 210 utilities across the United States, with some presence in Canada and the Caribbean Basin. And so we expect to see continued investment by the captured utilities. The utilities are deploying us as we roll out our analytics tools, as we bring to them the new capabilities around integrating and preparing for electric vehicles and rooftop solar through the acquisition that we've just announced at the end of January. The third area of growth is coming from some of the federal funding around stimulus dollars. To that end, we have already a number of utilities, existing customers, as well as prospective utilities in our pipeline, where we have helped them prepare applications to apply for federal funding, whether that comes in the form of existing programs currently under the management of FEMA, program called BRIC, B-R-I-C, Building Resiliency and Infrastructure Funding. It's about $1 billion a year that renews, and where utilities can apply for portions of that funding or portions of that $1 billion on grid resiliency and grid infrastructure. We've already seen a utility successfully apply for and receive money to accelerate their investment in our technology through that program. There are also some COVID-19 programs that are still outstanding that have to the tune of several $100 billion that are earmarked at the state, at the city, or at the state, at the county, at the city level. And so we're working hand in hand with a number of cities that are applying for their fair portion of money that's been allocated already at the state, county, and city level. And so that's another source of funding to try to help utilities accelerate the investment in our infrastructure and our technology. So it's really those three categories: backlog, ongoing sales into our captured accounts, stimulus dollars that is enabling utilities to access money that they otherwise didn't have access to accelerate investments.
Yeah, and I've noticed going to the balance sheet as well, your cost of sales give you some pretty good gross margins there too. But maybe we'll leave that for investigation from the audience, because I mean, they can go look at the stock and run some valuation metrics. But on that note, I really appreciate you coming out today. I think you offer some pretty incredible insights, Peter. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, Kyle, as always, thanks for having us and thanks for the questions.
Always a pleasure. So on that note, folks, you can check out Tantalus Systems under Grid. GRID is the ticker. I'll leave the links to the website down in the description. If you want to continue following this story, I work with Peter over on their channel at Tantalus Systems channel, which I'll also leave the links to. You can kind of get some of the news updates as they come down the wire. But in light of this, everyone, stay cool, stay awesome. And as always, I look forward to catching you in the next one.